Wakati wa jana tuliongea kidogo kuhusu Abrahamu, na siku ya leo katika mada ya siku ya leo ambayo tunaendelea kuongea juu ya wale wako hapa Diaspora, ningetaka kusoma katika kitabu cha Bwana, kutoka kitabu cha Bwana ambapo nasoma kutoka Genesis 12 na nasoma kutoka 1 mpaka hapo mwisho nitakuelezea, and then we'll hear a couple more songs from Masika before we can get into the word and talk a little bit about friends in the diaspora. And this is Genesis chapter 12, 1 all the way. Yahweh said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse the one who curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." Abram went forth as Yahweh had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth that they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Where they arrived in the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. Yahweh appeared to Abraham and said, "I will assign this land to your offsprings." And he built an altar there to Yahweh, who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to Yahweh, and invoked Yahweh by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages towards the Negeb. There was famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, that I may remain alive, thanks to you." When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how very beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male and female slaves, she-asses, and camels. But Yahweh afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh said to Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now here is your wife. Take her and go." And Pharaoh put agents in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all he possessed. From Egypt, Abram went up into the Negeb with his wife and all he possessed, together with Lot. Now, Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. This is the word of the Lord. The story that we have just read, the story of Abram, he has not changed his name yet. He's Abram. He will become Abraham later. It's a very complex story. But you know, when we tell our stories, sometimes it's very difficult to tell a complex story. And therefore, we tend to simplify these stories. We tend to share them in a way that is simpler, in a way that is easy to handle, in a way that is easy to tell, and also trying to weed out anything that is complex. But the story speaks of us human beings and our complexity. And even, in fact, when I think of us as people in the diaspora, those who are living in the diaspora, I think of these moments like now, thinking of a story like this, a story that is surely complex. And what are the complexities? Some of the complexities in these stories. There are a couple of them. First of all, we see that Abraham in himself has been asked by God to leave his family. I mean, who does that? Who leaves and abandons his community? Abram at this moment is asked to abandon his community, his gods, his land, his city, his people, to go to a place that he didn't know where. Who does that? That is part of this complexity of this story that I'm telling tonight or this morning. The second part of it is that when he allows himself and he follows God and he walks with God and he decides that this is the moment for him to do exactly what he's been asked to do, he cuts through the land of the Canaanite land. And as he's walking down or going through or walking through the land, the Lord speaks and says, I will give this land to your offsprings. God does not say, I will give this land to you. God says, I will give this land to your offsprings. That is the second part of the complexity of this story. The third and most important thing is that for the first time in the land of the Canaanites, near Shechem, Abraham put up an altar. And we are told that he worshipped and called the name of Yahweh for the first time in the land. That is the third point of the complex, how complex this story is all about. The fourth thing, there is famine. And this forces Abram and Sarah and all those who follow him to leave the land that they have just walked through, all the way to Negev, from the top all the way to the bottom, and to go to Egypt. I mean, Abram leave his father's land in Babylon. We know this, the land of the Chaldeans is definitely the Babylonian land. Part of it was the best, where you have the Tigris and the Euphrates, well-watered, a long history of development and irrigation and civilization. And he goes to this empty desert that is going to become his land. And then in between that moment of his calling, he steps into Egypt, a land of the pharaohs, a land where the greatest pyramids of the world are standing. That raises the question, why would God allow him to move from Babylon, cut through an empty land that God says that he's going to give it to his offsprings, and eventually goes to Egypt? While in Egypt, he tells a lie. He crosses the boundary of morality. And remember, if you were with me yesterday, and if you're listening, you would know that God says the reason why he was calling Abraham was to make him an instructor so that he could become a teacher, so that he could spread the word, not just the word, but he could teach his offsprings justice and rightness, justice and morality and ethics. And at the very beginning of his journey, he breaks that himself. He tells a lie, and he commands his wife to say that he is not his wife, but rather his sister. For what reason? preservation, that I may live. Because if you don't do that, you will live and I will die. That is basically what Abraham tells Sarai. In this complex story, we learn that it is out of that lie that his material world is turned upside down. He becomes so wealthy. He became a man full of cattle, of silver, and of gold. Well, I know some people say, yeah, that's good. But definitely, it's built on a lie. It's not built on the promise of God. There is instability in the life of Abraham, leaving his family, going to a place that he doesn't know where. Secondly, he's homeless. He's just left his motherland to go to this land that is completely empty with people that are called the Canaanites, people he might not even understand who they are. And as a result, he ended up seeking self-preservation. I believe God's word is being put to test here. The invitation, the calling, the understanding of who God is. How is Abraham going to become a teacher, a rabbi, one who instructs if at the very beginning of his journey he tells a lie? And this speaks into our lives even to this day. Self-preservation stands in the way all the time. But I want to believe and trust that in this narrative, Abraham is being prepared for things greater, for him to begin to know that his calling is not material. Because if God wanted to bless him, Babylon was the best place to bless him in, because Babylon was a wealthy, the land of the Chaldean was a wealthy land. As I've said, it is one of those places where civilization started, where the mechanism of how to do agriculture was well developed, just like in Egypt. So materially, if God really wanted to bless Abraham, the land of the Chaldean was the best place for him to bless him. But he's inviting him to go to a land that is empty and dry land. And the only mighty river, if you may call it a mighty river, is the river Jordan, which is not as great compared to the Euphrates, to the Tigris, and to the Nile. So what's my point today? As we are telling our narrative, as we are telling our story, we have to be very deliberate and very careful in how we tell this story. Because in moments like this, we may end up, instead of seeking God, we may end up seeking self-preservation, that you may become wealthy, you may become mighty. And there are challenges with people who move around, people who leave their motherland, people who go to this foreign land. And self-preservation is key. And we know this as people in the diaspora, that self-preservation is one of the most important elements. Self-preservation in terms of papers, staying legal or staying illegal, whichever way you choose. Self-preservation in the moment of dark form of racism that hates, that spreads hate and other stuff. And in self-preservation, sometimes people tend to forget the human element of those that surround them. And for this reason, they respond differently to the material world, and they engage differently with the material world, and they interact differently with people around this material world that they are that they are living in. And it is not just that. Even those that you leave behind, the land that is your motherland, they, because of the same thing, self-preservation, they tend to do certain things that are not very kind to the one who left the motherland. And for example, in one of the points that have been raised about the challenges of the people in the diaspora, there have been, and this is out of research, I'm not talking out of, from the abstract, that there is always unresponsive, slow response from relevant institutions when there is a need. A diasporan has a need, there is always unresponsive or slow response from relevant institutions. Secondly, just as Abraham misled Pharaoh, there is also misinformation and misleading people with wrong information, either here in the diaspora or over there in the motherland. Abraham literally, fraudulently got his wealth by tricking Pharaoh. We have had many corrupt people corrupt their ways in the systems, stealing from the system through corruption and through fraud in a way that does not make sense at all. Beside that, there is lack of mechanism to vet things and to vet people. Pharaoh did not take time to investigate this man who is walking into his land and claiming to be all these things. And it is the same, in fact, when it comes to the people of the diaspora. Sometimes we come here, we are not well vetted. Sometimes we take our wealth to Kenya, it's not well vetted. And of course, out of that, there's a lot of fake information, incomplete information, questionable, even land transactions, putting projects into jeopardy, and we have had many in the diaspora cry out. The thing is today, as we think about the narrative of Abraham, as a diaspora, you have to ask yourself, where do you stand? Does this story speak to you? Does its complexity speak to you? Where do you stand? May the Lord bless us, and may the Lord allow us to live life according to his will. Huu ni wakati wa maarifa na taarifa na kasisi. This is KWR, telling our story together.